In this episode of Marie TV, we do have some adult language. So if you have little ones around, grab your headphones now. Hey, it's Marie Forleo, and you are watching Marie TV, the place to be to create a business and life you love. And I'm so excited for today because I have my favorite author of all time, and we're going to be talking about creativity and doing the work that you were born to do. Stephen Pressfield is the best-selling author of The Legend of Bagger Vance, Gates of Fire, The Afghan Campaign, and The Lion's Gate, as well as the cult classics on creativity, The War of Art, Turning Pro, Do the Work, and Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit. His most recent book is The Artist's Journey, and his Wednesdays column on StephenPressfield.com is among the most popular writing blogs on the web. Steve, thank you so much for being here, number one.
It's great to be here, Marie. Thanks for having me.
And a huge, enormous thank you on behalf of myself and I know my audience. I have to tell this to you because you're sitting right here on my couch. Your work, every single book has helped me personally so much. And I get asked all the time what my favorite book is. And never once do I vary from War of Art.
Well, thank you. I'm glad it helps.
Yeah, you're awesome. You're amazing. So I want to start off with the reality of your creative journey because I feel like in today's day and age, many of us suffer from this instant gratification idea.
Yeah.
We want everything. I have people say Marie, I've been working at this for 3 months and nothing's happening. And I'm like, I want to just, slam my head against a wall. So you wrote for 17 years before earning your first penny from writing. It took you 27 before you got your first novel, The Legend of Bagger Vance, published. And it wasn't until you were in your early 50s that you actually started to make a living from your words. Is that right?
True.
So here's something you said, and then I want to hear your reaction to it. We cannot control the level of talent we've been given. We have no control over the nature of our gift. What we can control is our self-motivation, our self-discipline, our self-validation, and our self-reinforcement. What we can control is how hard and how smart we work.
Wow, I said that, huh?
You said, I know, you say lots of good shit.
It's pretty inspiring. So you want my reaction?
Yeah.
Well, I agree with it completely.
Yeah.
I do. I'm definitely a believer. Now, a lot of people don't write the way I do. I'm a believer in the muse, and I believe that projects kind of come to us almost like assignments, and that we have to follow them, or at least that's my theory. I only want to write what I want to write. Not everybody does that. A lot of people like to kind of write for hire. But in that case, again, not only can't we control our level of talent, I believe, but we can't even control what we're going to work on. Like I've always said that the books that I've written, I never knew I was going to write them before I wrote them. And I was always surprised that, I'd look at something and say, I did that, So I think the only thing we really can control is like what the Stoics say, that's a kind of a popular thing these days, that how professionally we work, how we manage our emotions, how we manage our expectations, how we deal with failure, and what our level of aspiration is, how hard we're going to try, how patient we are.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think there is that culture of instant gratification, the celebrity culture out there. All we got to do is do a sex tape or something like that, and the next thing you know, or a YouTube of clever YouTube video, and it's just not true,
I'm curious. Did you always know that you wanted to write? Was the little boy Steve?
No, I didn't, and that's kind of what made it hard for me along the way because I wasn't so sure. Yeah. And I have a feeling that maybe a lot of people that are watching you, Marie, are in the same boat where you don't have that kind of clarion bell that tells you, if you're Bob Dylan, like at age 19, what you want to do. But for me, no. I mean, I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't have any real success early at it. It wasn't like I was a genius in English or anything like that.
Yes.
So along the way, self-doubt was an incredible thing. It was like, really? Is this really what because there wasn't that much positive reinforcement coming back.
Yeah.
So that was a really hard one for me in my long long journey. And I think it is for a lot of people that you're just not sure.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point in terms of that distinction. Like, I know there are several people in my life who were very clear since the time they were little of the thing that they wanted to do. And eventually they made it happen. And for me, similarly, I had no idea. And part of my journey, I think, was because some of it was cultural. I didn't really know what I wanted. I'd never seen anyone do the thing that I'm doing now. There was
You've really invented this thing called Marie Forleo that didn't exist before, right?
I don't think so. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But in terms of even the world of coaching or creating content, none of those things were really present. Growing up in like the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, it was just not there yet. So I just really appreciate that you said that, because I'm sure there are many people listening who are trying to figure out what their gift is or how to express that gift. And I think it's really reassuring to hear from folks who say, hey, I didn't have it figured out for quite a long time. But if you keep showing up and experimenting and listening to that inner voice, there's a really good chance you're going to find it.
Yeah, I think that's about the only thing you can do, and just keep plugging.
And what's cool too? I just have to say, this is like an amazing fun fact that I just discovered about you, that your literary agent, Sterling Lord, can we talk about him for a minute?
Sure.
He's 98 years old.
When we finish here, I'm going to have lunch with him.
Yay!
Yeah. He's 98 years old, and I just had a situation where he's old enough that he made the deal for On the Road, Jack Kerouac's On the Road in 1948 for $900.
Dude, that's amazing. And he's your literary agent, and he's still going like a champ.
Well, I just had an experience with him where I left him a few years ago, and with my partner Sean Coyne. And I just had a book that I've been working on really hard for the last 3 years, and it's had just nothing but negative response. And eventually even Sean gave up on it. And I was ready to, I was really definitely bummed by this thing. And so I just maybe 8 months ago, I called up Sterling out of the blue. I knew he was 98. I didn't even know if he was still working. And I just said, Sterling, I got a book and nobody wants. Will you represent it? And he said, hell yeah. And within like 2 months or something, he had made a deal. So, and it's very exciting for him to get some action going at this stage of the game. So
this is pretty cool, though. But can we just trace back for a minute? Because I just need everyone to hear this. Because I've been talking about you. We've had conversation earlier on Skype many, many years ago. I talk about you every chance I get because I love you so much. I just need everyone to really not skip over the point that you've been working on this latest project for how long? And it kept getting
3 years. Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah.
Even your partner was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And was there something in you that said, I'm not done yet, and that's why you called Sterling?
Yes, I just couldn't stand it because I love this thing.
Yeah.
And I'd been through the mill with it.
Yeah.
And but if Sterling hadn't come through, I don't know what I would have done. I was really at the end of the road. But that, I think, is pretty typical for projects. They just take a long time.
They do, don't they?
To be done, and then to sell them is like a whole other scenario. And it doesn't seem to be, for me at least, to get any easier.
Yeah. No, I love talking about this because I have this notion for me of myself. I consider myself a bit of a turtle. Like sometimes people look from the outside and they're like, where'd she come from? It's so fast. I'm like, honey, it's been 20 years so far. And I feel like every little thing that I do takes 5 to 25 times longer than a certain part of my mind wants it to.
Yeah.
And I try and share this a lot because I feel like many of us go through this.
Yeah.
But
it's like a kitchen remodel. It always takes twice as long or 3 times and costs 3 times as much.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So this is actually setting my soul at ease to hear this from you, knowing how much admiration and how much experience you have in this game, to be like, it actually still happens this way. So I want to dive into resistance because I feel like it's a cornerstone of your work. For those who don't know, which I don't know who you are or what rock you've been living under, can you share your definition of resistance with us?
Resistance with a capital R for me. If this were your keyboard here and you were going to sit down to write a novel or a screenplay or something, and you sat down the first day and it was blank, radiating off that screen like radioactive magma would be a negative force saying, let's not do this today. Let's go have a drink. Let's go to the beach. Let's do something else. And it also would say things like, who do you think you are to tackle this project? You have no experience. Who cares about your ideas? Everything's been done before. It's all of those self-sabotage things. There seems to be a force in the world that is a negative force against anything any dream that we would have. An analogy that I always use is if the dream is a tree, resistance is the shadow. That's and as soon as the tree appears, the shadow appears, right? So it's that negative force that prevents us or is trying to prevent us. And it seems to me that overcoming resistance is far more important than talent or anything else.
Yes.
Any gift. There are a million people who have talent, but it's a very, very few that can sit down, and take it all the way from, A to Z.
Yes.
Or do what you've done here. Here we have this whole setup here. People can't see it, but there's a bunch of people out here. There's all kinds of stuff,
Yeah.
And that you have really created that. That didn't exist. It wasn't like that was a job category that you applied for.
Right.
And I think that's the same thing. Even if somebody's going to be a writer or a filmmaker, they're going to be a specific type of writer or filmmaker that probably doesn't exist right now. Even like YouTube didn't exist a little while ago. So that's ability to overcome that resistance, that self-sabotage and that self-doubt, in my opinion, is way more important than talent.
I agree with you 10,000%. And I'm curious if you've noticed the nature of resistance in your experience. Has it shifted for you over your career? So for example, for me, when I sit down at the blank page for this show, I've written you. I'm working on, putting the finishing touches on my book. The thing is kicking my ass from here to Sunday. It's like, and I consider myself an extremely hard worker, very diligent, overcome that resistance, but it's like, it doesn't seem to get easier.
No, it never gets easier. In fact, I think resistance is so diabolical. It really has its own intelligence,
Yes.
It's like the alien that keeps evolving from this little thing, Yes. And so that even at my stage of the game, where I've done it a million times, it comes up with more subtle, rationalizations and self-rationalizations that to kind of trick me into taking a break or not doing it. But it never goes away. And never gets any easier, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, no, I love this because I feel like, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but there's so much power in understanding a bit of what's coming at you.
Yes. It's almost like once you understand that,
yes,
you can beat it.
Yes. So I love that you hit upon this notion of how diabolical it is in its shape-shifting nature. So I'll say this. I remember how resistance had a certain tenor and tone, and it said certain things at the beginning. A lot of my self-doubt had to do with and this is, again, I'm going to roll my eyes at myself, people. If you've heard this before, forgive me. But starting a coaching business as a life coach as a 23-year-old, I was like, who the hell's going to hire a 20? You haven't even lived life yet. This is the dumbest idea ever. How can you be smart and have this dumb idea at the same time? This was nuts. But I would have never gotten here today. But today, it sounds different. So today, my resistance will sound something like, oh, well, now I have more to live up to because I've been doing this, so I feel, I just want to say this because I think people have a mistaken notion that they're going to arrive at some point. Yes. Or then it's going to be easy, and they're not going to hear those
voices.
Where's
the camera?
All of them.
You're never going to arrive at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, I love these conversations because I feel like sometimes there is this veil, or people have these mistaken notions about folks that are just in the game, grinding it out day after, and they feel like they have some magical, mystical ability that they don't, and it's not true.
Not true.
It's just not true.
And to look at it in the positive way.
Yeah.
Resistance to me is sort of like the villain in a movie.
Yeah.
If there were no villain, there'd be no movie. So resistance gives meaning to everything.
Yes.
If it was just there and all you had to do was pick it up, what would be the point of that?
And there's no great stories to tell then too.
Yeah.
Right?
So resistance really gives significance, I think, to the fact that it is so hard.
Yeah. I love it. Let's talk about turning pro. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been on stage. I've had War of Art with me, and I've read the difference between like an amateur and a pro, and I've just read it down. It's like, you guys got to go this. So for those who don't know, what does turning pro mean?
Well, if you start with the idea of resistance and that there is such a thing, then the next question is how do you defeat it? And I think there's two paths that we go down that are wrong paths, or paths that don't help us. One is we think that if we're feeling resistance, we're wrong, quote unquote wrong. So we need to become right. We need to change something that way. And I don't think that's true at all. The other thing when we think of we have resistance is we think, oh, we're sick, right? Or we need to heal. We need to somehow find the cure and then we'll get over it. And I don't think either of those ways work of thinking, because they're self-judgmental. They put you down. It's like in training, in the gym.
Yeah.
If you have a bad day, you can't say to yourself, I'm a loser, I'm a bum, I'm not an athlete. You just have to say, well, that was a bad day and I'm going to, go at it the next way. But anyway, the concept of turning pro, or the idea that there's such a thing as an amateur and there's such a thing as a professional, and that amateurs have amateur habits and professionals have professional habits, and that why people get defeated by resistance, in my opinion, is they're thinking like amateurs. I certainly know that's the way I was.
Yes.
And if you're an amateur, you're in it kind of for fun. You're sort of a dabbler. You think, oh, well, today I'll do it, right? You're a weekend warrior. When adversity comes, you fold in the face of adversity. If there's anything in your life that is a serious problem, you'll let that take over your whole life. It's sort of, if we think of it in terms of athletes, it's like an athlete that's injured.
Yep.
If LeBron James has got problems with his knee, he somehow plays hurt,
Yep.
So the professional attitude is a whole other different thing. I mean, you're a pro. Look at you. Look at this thing here. And a pro gets up every morning and does the work, doesn't take days off, or if they do, they only take them off so they can come back
refreshed,
stronger the next time.
That's right.
And when a pro hits adversity, they just simply rally in the face of it and kind of use it in their own way. If a pro is hurt, they play hurt. And it's a whole different mindset.
Yes.
And so to me, that was sort of what really helped me overcome resistance. It was just to start to flip that switch in my mind and say, I'm a pro.
Yes.
I'm not an amateur, I'm a pro. And when I want to quit or I want to, back off something, I just say to myself, would Kobe Bryant do this? Would Tom Brady do this? I'm sorry, all you people who hate the Patriots. I do too. But in any event, I do think to think of yourself as a professional instead of an amateur is a big, big plus.
It's huge. And I love you talk about it. A really easy way to see this is how we show up in our day jobs, right? If we have day jobs.
Yeah, right.
It's like you just show up and you do the work no matter what. And I think about it this way. We have a program that's called B School. I think I've told you about it before. And we've had 44,000 people so far go through it. And I often answer questions and they'll be like, okay, what's happening with your business? And I try and help them navigate best I can, just give a little perspective. And then I'm like, how often are you publishing your newsletter? Well, I publish it like once or twice, and then I get bored, or then I forget, and then I come back and I'm like, it's consistency. And I wanted to bring this up because I feel like that notion of you show up no matter what is it's actually all of how everything I've created gets done. Like,
I'm sure that's true. That's how everything gets done, right?
It's how everything gets done.
Yeah.
It's like you don't necessarily always feel like it, but you show up and you get it.
Yeah.
You make it happen.
Yeah.
And I love that notion because it's meant the world to me, how you explain the difference between an amateur and a pro. And I just want to make some clarifications because, again, I can hear, I've developed this gift over time of hearing the audience say, but what about this? What we're saying in terms of being a professional, it's like we don't want you to hurt yourself. When Steve was saying play injured, it's not about putting yourself out. There's an essence, I think, in each of us where you take a look and you go, I got this. I can do this. This might be hard. There's been times in our business where it's required us doing a shoot over the weekend. Or you know what? Everything goes to hell. Technology breaks. We're shooting here and there's helicopters and we all have to stay a couple more hours. It's like no one's whining or crying and going, I can't. They just do it. And that's, I think, part of that spirit.
And like you're saying, Marie, you might have said it so fluidly that it went over people's heads. When we work in a real job, we're already pros in that job.
Yes.
We do show up. We know the reason we're pros is the job enforces it on it, right? They'll fire us. They'll, if we don't show up every day. But then when people leave that job and go off on their own to try to be a writer or an artist of some kind, they tend to drop that whole attitude and they think, well, I don't have to do it. It's Monday. I don't have to go in because I'm not, but
Yes.
you do have to go in.
Yes.
And that's really the secret, if there is such a thing.
I think, too, there's another aspect that you've written about. Self-validation is another quality of a professional. And you said that's a big word, and maybe it's hard to understand. But it's about somewhere finding the ability to judge your own stuff.
Now, how do you do that, Marie? Let me ask you that.
Oh, gosh, it is hard as hell. So I have a couple of different ways that I do it. There are times when I feel like it depends on the project and the context, but if I'm writing, let's say, an episode of Marie TV, I'll often do like a couple of first drafts on my own. If it's not an interview, if it's like something straight to camera, and I'm either answering a question or there's a topic I want to riff on, and I know, because you probably know this, a lot of my stuff, there's like skits and sketches because I have this weird sense of humor and I build in all these things. And so I'll do a couple of passes on my own, and then I have to ping out to someone else. Like I have to either have a member of Team Forleo or someone else go, okay, can we go through this together? Because I think, 60 or 70% of this is working, but I know I'm missing the mark, but I don't know if I can see, you know what I mean, how to thread that
needle. That's why I wanted to ask you, because in a way, you're the product.
Yeah.
So it's very hard, I would think, to look at yourself objectively and pull back from it. I mean,
yes.
How do you do it just by having other people give you feedback?
I do. And then I think what I've been able to do over the years is surround myself with folks that I really trust, so that if we need to, I call them creative like boxing matches. I get into them with, my creative director. I'll get into them with people on the team where I'm like, okay, I really believe in this. And they have eyes on different lenses of the business. Like, let's just use a current one. Like, is that even appropriate? Because things in culture change so fast. I would never want to hurt anyone unintentionally. I don't want things to get taken off topic and like go into this strange place that's nothing I intended. So sometimes we'll do battle, but I trust them and they trust me, and I feel like we can go to the mat. But ultimately, it's my call. When it comes to now book writing, I'm curious to hear your process on it. I feel like there's certain parts for me, and I would love to hear how you work with Sean or anyone else. There's been parts in this book I'm like, I don't know if it's any good.
Yeah.
It's all shit.
Yeah,
I feel like I took my stack, threw it up in the air, and like, can someone help me figure it out?
Yeah. Well, my partner, Sean Coyne, who was my original editor on Gates of Fire and also was the publisher of The War of Art.
Yes.
I'm so lucky that I have somebody that I really trust, and that I can give him a pile of pages and he'll give me, feedback that I believe,
Yes.
And
that's a key piece. I don't want to interrupt you, but for everyone listening, two things I heard from both of us: people we trust.
Yeah.
Someone we trust their feedback, because
they're hard to find.
They're very hard to find, because that other person may be smart, intelligent, talented, but if there's not like a soul alignment, I feel, or like a philosophical
or somebody that just gets you or gets what you're trying to do.
Yes. Their feedback can kind of send you.
Yeah.
It's happened to me before where it's like I get in a creative cul-de-sac over here and I'm like, wait, this is so far away from who I am.
Yeah. I want to say one thing about writers groups where people give you feedback.
Yes.
I'm like completely opposed to that. I think that can be the most destructive thing, because you're getting feedback from other people who don't know what they're doing either.
It's like the blind leading the blind.
Yeah.
No.
And also the whole concept of jealousy and all that kind of stuff that goes. So to me, it's really important to find somebody that you really trust. But beyond that, like you were saying, Marie, it's self-validation.
Yeah.
In the end, the bottom line, being a professional, I think, and going away from being an amateur is like also going from working in a job to being an entrepreneur, to being completely on your own.
Yes.
And when you're in a job or you're in a situation, where you have a mentor or a boss or something, you look to that external voice to tell you, oh, that's good, you did it right? We've all done had jobs where we take something into a boss and they look at it and then they mark it up and they give it back to you, and as you walk into the boss, you're completely giving away your power. That may be a good thing when you're young and you're learning, but at some point you do have to sort of acquire the ability or teach yourself to read your own stuff and know whether it's good enough or not,
Yes.
And I don't know if there's any way to do that other than experience.
Yeah.
And even then, you still need a great eye from somebody else. But self-validation is very important, not looking to other people because they always tell you it stinks,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you listen to them, then it's over.
It is over. And it would have been over for your latest project, right? Because you have a lot of people who you love.
Definitely.
I want to talk just for a minute, one more thing on going pro before we get into some tactics. I loved you talk about how your day changes when you turn pro. And I think that that's so practical for us because one of the things that folks struggle with, especially when they're going out on a creative project or becoming a freelancer or trying to become an entrepreneur or business owner, is like, whoa, if I don't have to show up for a job, I got all this free time.
Yeah.
So, you wrote, it changes what time we go to bed and what time we get up. It changes how we organize our day. It changes what we read and what we feed our bodies. The amateur tweets, the pro works. And I was like, Steve Pressfield just took me to church on that one.
But that certainly is true.
Yes.
Because again, when we were working in a factory, our day was structured for us by the factory, right? You got to show up at 7:25 when the whistle, and you can have lunch from 11:30 to bump. But as soon as we're on our own as artists, then we have to structure our day. And the reason I'm sure that you go to the gym is because you found that helps in some way.
Yeah.
And
I find my physical body is a huge creative channel. And when I disconnect and spend too much time up here, I'm done.
Yeah, me too.
Totally
what you
done.
eat, how much sleep you get.
Yes.
All those things. There's I think it's in the War of Art, it might be in Turning Pro.
I have all of them.
Where I talk about Roseanne Cash's moment that comes from her book, Composed. And if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. But she had her sort of moment. She was already successful. She had a dream. I won't go into the dream because it's, we'll save time. But the bottom line is when she woke up from this dream, the dream sort of kicked her in the ass and just said to her, you are an amateur. You are a dilettante. I don't care if you've had 4 #1 hits. You're not writing songs. You're just covering other people's material. You're not living up to what your talent is. And she said in the book, Composed, she said, I changed everything about the way I was. I changed what time I got up in the morning. I changed how I took care of my body. I started going to studying painting because I wanted to see how you express yourself without words and without music. And then she locked on to certain habits that she had, bad habits like daydreaming, like going off, and she would sort of teach herself to check herself and stop herself when she started doing that thing. And then she elevated her level of aspiration. She said, the next album, I'm going to write either every song or co-write every song. So that's sort of how she restructured her day, not just her day, but her week, her month, her year, her whole life.
Yeah.
And that's another sort of way of saying she turned pro.
Absolutely.
Even though she was already a success.
Yes.
But not to the level that she wanted to be.
I think that's such a great distinction because one of the kind of dangerous areas we have to watch out for, I believe, especially when we start to get, whether it's some recognition or financial success or whatever that looks like for you, is this idea like, oh, I can kind of sit back. Like, oh, like I've figured this out, or I can just keep it going. But it gets stale real fast. And I love what you said about there was this voice inside of her that said, no, there's more for you. There's another level. She elevated her ambition for who she could be.
Yeah.
And listen to that. And I think
she certainly has taken it there in the years since.
Yeah. It's exciting. I want to talk about getting a project started, the foolscap method. Because I feel like it's so simple. And I believe that I wrote, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, was that you heard it, but it took you quite a number of years to actually get it, meaning to start using it.
Oddly enough, the friend that taught me this thing, I just had breakfast with him.
No way.
2 days ago.
That's cool.
He was sort of a mentor of mine. And what he was a very successful writer, and I was just struggling, couldn't get anything done. I was just totally at sea. And he took me to lunch at Joe Allen's over on 40, whatever it is, street. And what he said to me was, Steve, God made a single sheet of yellow foolscap paper to be exactly the right length to hold the entire outline of a novel. And that sort of, woke me up in there, because it was on the subject of getting a project started.
Yes.
What I would have done at that time, or I would just plunge in and say, oh, chapter 1, and I'll just, or I would say, oh, I better outline it, every scene, and that would be so much, it would blow my mind. But the idea of, and I think this is good for any project,
Yes.
not just a book or something, is if you can just get it on one page, boil it, because it forces you to boil it down to the essentials. What's Act 1, what's Act 2, what's Act 3, what's it about, what's the climax? And if you can get it just on one page, then you suddenly have a certain confidence. Like if you and I are sailing to Tahiti, if we can just put on one page, okay, we're going to go to Hawaii first, we're going to stay 3 days, then we're going to, hit the current, the Marquette, whatever it is, and that'll get us there. And we take it from A to Z on just one page, then it gives you confidence that you can do it. At least you have an idea of what the whole thing is.
Yeah.
Now, here's just a little sidebar to this, Marie. I've been looking forward to seeing my friend Norm for lunch, who I saw 2 days ago, and I wanted to ask him more about that. I sort of said, well, what was your thinking on it? And of course, he hadn't thought about anything beyond that. He didn't. I was going to hope he was going to tell me, well, I divide it into A, B, C, and D, but he didn't do any of that sort of stuff. So.
But I love it because it does work. And I feel like one of the things that I've learned to do, and I try and offer this as a suggestion for anyone who wants to take it, is sometimes when I'm working on a creative project, it's a little different, but I need to work on both the creative side of it, like what is this thing, and also think about the sales and the marketing of it.
That's really interesting. I never even thought about that.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that more in a little bit, but it's like this idea of the foolscap, I love, like identifying its theme, breaking it down to the fundamentals, do it on one page. And I love that you wrote, resistance will make us fiddle around forever unless we draw the line and stop it. That's what the foolscap trick does. It cuts out the crap. It concentrates the mind.
Which is very true, because a lot of us love to get into research.
Yes.
Right, Bill, before I can start, let me do 3 months of research.
Totally.
So if you're only going to do it on one page, forget the research. Do the research later.
Let's talk about the practicality of from Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit. I loved this, that there's one idea every writer and entrepreneur needs, the ability to switch back and forth between your own point of view and that of the customer reader, which is exactly kind of what I was just talking about with this little method. I think that's a tricky dance for most people, like shifting perspective, especially perhaps when they're first starting out. So my question to you is, what are some of the lessons you've learned about how to do that? I just shared one of mine, which was like working on the marketing and the sales piece and the creative piece.
I think it's, if you're telling a joke.
Yeah.
And you need to be looking in the eyes of the people that you're telling the joke to, so to see if they're getting bored, or are they confused? Do they not understand? The two rabbis walked into the bar with the alligator, that kind of thing. So, I think it's just a natural empathetic thing that you have to have if you're going to do any creative thing. Because an example I always think about is the ride of Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland.
Yes.
Where you enter the tunnel and you're in the boat. And if you and I were designing that ride, we would be thinking to ourselves, we'd put ourselves right in the mind of the person in the boat.
Yes.
What do we want to show them first? What do we want to show them second? How long do we want them to see, the pirates, hanging, walking a plank, or whatever it is? And we'd be constantly asking ourselves, are they bored yet? Are they interested? Are we pulling them forward? Did number B pull them forward to number C? Or that kind of thing. So I think that's just a natural thing that anyone has. Probably stand-up comedy would probably be the real crucible for that, where you really have to be in touch with what the audience is following you or whatever.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up because I do think it's so important. When I've worked with some people on like creating their first, they're doing something, they want to teach a course, or they're creating something like, and I have all these ideas and and I'm like, yeah, but we need to put on our customer hat.
Yes,
And then
exactly.
we need to put on our customer hat. And then we also have to think about too, like I was sharing, this idea of how are you going to sell and market it? Like I just went through this with like my Amazon copy. I'd gotten a draft of the Amazon copy of the book from the publisher, and they were like, hey, what do you think in this? I was like, no, because that's my deal. I need to write that. But it's this notion of thinking, and I had to put myself in the reader's head and going, what are the important parts to her or him? What are the questions she is asking? What are the benefits she wants to get out of this? And how can I position all this stuff that I've created so it matches those points?
I think when we're young and we're starting out in something, a lot of times we're in our ego completely. And all we want to do is kind of put our stuff out there. Let me tell you this. Let me tell you that. Let me tell you this other thing. And we forget that we're actually talking to somebody, and that person is going to get bored and impatient and so on and so forth.
Yes. I want to talk to you about an early part of your career. I'm really curious your perspective on this because I know you did a couple rounds in advertising and copywriting.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan. Like, I make no bones about this. I freaking love marketing. I love sales. I teach copywriting. Part of the reason is because, who knows why, because I love it and I think I'm pretty good at it. But I also believe that for any artist or any entrepreneur or anyone that's starting their own philanthropy or there's something that they want to share with the world, it's a crucial aspect of what we do in this day and age. So I'm curious from your perspective looking back, if you ever notice anything that you've learned in your ad and copywriting days, like supporting your ability to do the genius work that you do now.
It's only what we were just talking about, Marie, the idea of nobody wants to read your shit.
Yes.
Which is the first lesson you learn in advertising, because everybody hates advertising, right?
Yeah.
They really don't want to read your ad for Preparation H or your commercial for the newest drug, that stops whatever. So you have to learn, as you well know, like to put yourself in the shoes of the viewer, who hates you already.
Yes.
And somehow, whatever you come up with has got to be so good or so interesting or so clever. You just can't settle for shrinks hemorrhoids, for $1.95. It's got to be something better than that.
Yeah, you've also written too, I think this is just connector, about defining the problem, like thinking about things in terms of problem and solution, which works for us in ads, right?
Yes.
It's like, can we speak to what that customer or reader's problem is?
Yeah.
Which...
I'm not so sure I've figured out how to translate that into other stuff, but it's
hard.
Certainly true in advertising.
Yeah, no.
Because every ad is a problem.
Absolutely.
Right? How do we get people to care about progressive insurance, And there is a solution somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there. Thinking about the problem, thinking about the solution. Okay, I want to talk. This was one of my favorite things I wanted to ask you because I feel like it's so useful. It's circling back on something we mentioned earlier, but the predictability of resistance in terms of stages.
It's a really good, that's great already, Marie. Yeah.
This initial resistance that many of us feel when getting started, we kind of talked about that, right?
Yeah.
I'm afraid. I don't think I'm good enough. Who am I to do this? It's all been done before. It's never going to work out.
Right.
So we've covered that. But then I want you to walk us through like 1 month in when you're doing it, and then you realize how much work it's going to be. You've written this. Why did I start this thing? Everybody hits that, right? But no one really talks about it.
Yeah, there's definitely, that book, Do the Work, really was kind of about the predictable stages. And sort of what you were just saying, Marie, about the book you're working on now and it's kicking your butt.
Yeah.
I can kind of tell you, just from the little you've said, you're at a very predictable stage, which is at closing in on the finish line.
Totally.
And that's where it's a predictable stage where resistance is really going to be high.
Yes.
But to go back to what you're saying, there's obviously at the start, you have resistance. Then it's sort of, to me, I analogize it to sailing like Columbus, sailing off into the ocean. Once you get beyond sight of land, that's the second point. Suddenly you look back and there's no land anymore, and you don't know where the Indies are, and you go, oh my God, what have I done? That's a second point of resistance. Then another one is the Act 2 miseries, when you're sort of halfway through. What David Mamet says is, it's hard to remember that you set out to drain the swamp when you're up to your ass in alligators, And that's So that's another predictable moment when you're right in the middle of something and you're so far from the beginning, you've forgotten the fun of the beginning, and you're so far from the end, you think you're never going to make it. Plus, everything becomes really complicated in the middle for some reason. I don't know why.
The messy middle.
And you really got to slog through that. And then when you get to the end, and then even when that's, just before the finish line, it's like hitting the wall in a marathon at mile 24, whatever that is. And so I would say to you, Marie, you just got to push through it, just
pushing, baby.
cinch up and keep going.
I highlighted that part because I realized that, and I am really close. And my the folks that are supporting me with the book, my editor, they're like, Marie, it's so close. I'm like, it doesn't feel so close, but I'm trusting.
Here's another little trick for whatever this is worth.
Yes.
Because this used to be my problem for years and years was I couldn't finish anything. I'd get right to the 1 yard line and I'd fumble the ball on the 1 yard line. And one trick I sort of learned, sometimes you don't think you're done, but you're done. It's like I had an agent who used to say to me, "How are you close?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm close." He'd say, "Close is good enough. Give it to me." So sometimes we torture ourselves and think, "Oh, I got to get that last cherry on the top." And really, you can almost do that 3 weeks from now. But turn it in, ship it, as Seth Godin says.
Yes. Thank you for that. I want to talk about the artist journey now, the unglamorous, uncinematic part, the grindy part, because I feel like once folks get a certain level of momentum and they've gotten some projects out there, they've shipped them, they have it under their belt, the artist journey feels like it's this, first of all, it's the most recent of the books. How do you define it, and why is it important for us to recognize this as a separate stage?
They're really good questions, Marie.
I try. Maybe I should do this for a
You
living.
actually read some of these things. You really think about it. Yeah. But it really is, it just says sort of thinking about my own experience.
Yeah.
That I could sort of divide my life in half, And the first half, what I would call the hero's journey part of it, and I think this applies to everybody, is where you're just coming from, you don't know who the hell you are, what you want to do, and you finally sort of reach the point where you say, okay, I am an artist. Or whatever it is. I am a writer, I am an entrepreneur, I am a dancer, whatever it is. And at that point, the hero's journey is over. It's sort of, if we do the analogy to the Odyssey, Odysseus has come back to Ithaca and, reclaimed his kingship, And in the hero's journey, the hero, in the myth, the Joseph Campbell version, the hero always comes back with a gift for the people, right? So if your hero's journey ends and you say, okay, I'm a writer, I'm a screenwriter, whatever it is, now the second half of your life begins that I call the artist journey. Now the question is, okay, I'm going to be a writer. What the hell am I going to write? And what is my gift? Who am I is really the question. Philip Roth would have one answer, and Bruce Springsteen would have another answer, and Joni Mitchell would have another answer. They each have different gifts, and that's when, as you were saying, kind of the mundane part, the sort of the Roseanne Cash part, what we were just talking about, where you sort of say to yourself, okay, I got to build my day. Yes. I've got to build my month, build my year. I've got to be thinking in long term, in the next 10 years, the rest of my life. And what albums what's the next album and that kind of thing. But really, it's answering the question, who am I? What is my gift? And that's quite different from the hero's journey of thrashing around out in the real world, having love affairs and getting divorced and being into drugs and all that other sort of stuff. That's over, I think, once you pass a certain point.
Yes.
But now it becomes almost as hard. It's like you're just coming into your studio, if you're a dancer, let's say, and it's like, or what am I going to choreograph? What do I do?
What's my voice?
Yeah, what's my voice? Who am I?
Yeah.
And that's really hard.
It is really hard. Sometimes people, it's funny, I have a kind of love-hate relationship with social media. Even though I do this, like my team will tell you.
I have a hate relationship.
I love it. I can't stand taking selfies. Like they literally have to force me. I'm just not interested. I'm like, I don't want to look at myself. Why do y'all want to look at me? And sometimes be like, well, we want more behind the scenes shit. I'm like, you literally want to see me in like a dirty bun, haven't showered for like 2 days, sit on my couch in like the same pair of, I'm like, it's not glamorous. Like this is a show. we do this because it's a show and I love the show and I love sharing information, all that stuff. But my point is, and when you're in the artist journey, when you're working on your voice, when you're developing a body of work, it's like, it's grindy, people.
Yeah,
it's not cute.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely not cute. But I just want to say this because, again, I want to demystify stuff for people because there's so many mistaken notions that I think can keep people paralyzed or keeping themselves as though they're not measuring up. They're not good enough. They have these comparison things that they do. So the reason that I'm saying this is because I believe, part of the artist journey is that tough work. And I want to go to this place next because it's one of my favorite parts of that book. Put your ass where your heart wants to be. Put your ass where your heart wants to be. I know you have a hate relationship with social, but I used that quote when I was talking about this book when it first came out. People were like, they lost their shit for good reason because that's what it's about.
Well, it's a simple way of saying just show up, Yes. If you want to be a writer, sit in front of the keyboard, put your ass in that place.
Yes.
And just grind it out. And eventually the muse will come to you,
Yes.
I believe the muse kind of flies over us every day and kind of looks down to see if we're working, if we're doing our work. And if we are, sooner or later, the magic will happen, I think.
I agree with you. I want to close by having you read a passage from the book, which I think is perfect for our audience, if you wouldn't mind.
Not at all.
And I have it outlined, of course, in hot pink. It's that section.
Okay, it's nice
right
and
there.
short, huh?
Yeah, it's nice and short.
So I'll just read it?
Yeah, because it's your word. I don't want to read your words, but I think it's so perfect for the show.
Suspending self-judgment doesn't just mean blowing off the "you suck" voice in our heads. It also means liberating ourselves from conventional expectations, from what we think our work ought to be or should look like. Stay stupid, follow your unconventional, crazy heart.
Yes! That is one of my favorites. Steve Pressfield, thank you so much for coming, hanging out. Thank you for doing the work
This
that's
has been
impacted
great, Marie.
millions.
And thanks for asking such great questions that, pulled out, the essence of what I've been trying to put in these books.
Well, you've done a brilliant job. We love you, and I can't wait to continue to read everything you create.
Hey, congratulations on what you're doing here, and thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you. Now, Steve and I would love to hear from you. We talked about so many incredible things. I'm curious, what's the biggest insight that you're taking away, and how can you put that insight into action right now? Leave a comment below and let us know. Now, as always, the best conversations happen over at the magical land of marieforleo.com, so go there and leave a comment now. And once you're there, be sure to subscribe to our email list and become an MF Insider. You're going to get instant access to an audio I created called How to Get Anything You Want. It is so good. You'll also get some exclusive content, special giveaways, and some personal updates from me that I just don't share anywhere else. Stay on your game and keep going for your dreams, because the world really does need that special gift that only you have. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time on Marie TV. Hey, are you ready to bring your dream business to life? Is it finally time to make the difference you were born to make? Good, because we can help. Get started now at joinbschool.com. Zach, do you have all the alarms on? Will everything beep and vibrate? Stay in game, keep one for dream. Best gift on you have. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Marie TV.
Do it like that.